Hello and welcome to the inaugural The People's News podcast. That is the initial name for it. Today we're going to be covering a number of issues, some that we agree on, some that we don't. The Amber Rod resignation, obviously, the UK's appalling growth rate at the moment, 0.1%. I mean, we're practically getting smaller. We're also going to talk about some wider issues, given we are now in a fiscal surplus. And the government is getting more money than it thinks it has. Is it time for the Tories to end austerity?
Yeah.
We think. So let's should we kick off with that?
Yeah.
So we're often told by the government that we have a budget deficit. Essentially, we borrow money. We spend more than we get from tax revenue. And so we have to borrow money to make up for that excess spend. But we're now in a fiscal surplus. So in theory, the Tory justification for austerity is no longer valid. Is that correct?
Yeah, they could pay down. They don't have to cut any more. They could pay down the debt quickly on running this, what the cuts they've currently done.
Yeah, and the whole argument with that started these austerity cuts back with Cameron were due to the budget deficit, and now with the surplus, the argument goes back to the Tories. Well, you've achieved what you wanted to achieve. Start spending more.
I think we'd remember. I think my economics ability is probably less than both of yours, but I do A-level economics, and my teacher described it to me today as kind of like a credit card. If you have a credit card, poisonous things. I never want to have a credit card. But just hear me out. Hear me out a second. If you have a credit card, there is the minimum monthly payback you must pay, and the government can just pay the minimum per year, and that's it. We don't actually have to. I mean, obviously, we should be trying to cover our budget deficit, but we can just pay the debt interest per year. And it's an interesting concept.
Yeah,
but you don't like that example, do you?
Never ever treat a government's debt problems like a house or a credit card or anything else, because if you spend, two reasons why it's wrong is, firstly, the government can never run out of money, and secondly, if you spend money as a house, the government can never run out of money. If you spend
Greece is against.
If you spend money, Greece is different because it doesn't have its own currency. Okay, if you spend money as a government, you generate more revenue for yourself. We've seen in this country that bringing down the deficit through cuts, all it did was stagnate growth, kill wage growth, and it didn't bring the deficit down.
It increased the deficit.
Well, it's decreased the deficit now. How many years? 8 years to get the deficit down. What I've seen, and the economic theories that the Labour Party have been pushing, is what we've seen in Portugal, where what they've done, instead of they've had austerity and they changed to investing in healthcare, social services, education, just like the Labour Party want to here. They had their deficit cut by a half in 2 years by spending more money. And that sounds mad, but what happens is, when you put money into an economy in this way, you create more jobs, which go on to create more jobs, because people are spending money from those jobs, and you get investment into the economy, and that brings down the deficit. If you cut, all you do is you cut jobs, which means you take consumers out of the economy, and when you remove consumers, you remove spending. When you remove spending, you remove jobs, and you cut out more consumers, and the cycle goes on and on and on.
Yeah. I think if we put it in sort of more economic terms, just briefly, when you cut out consumers, you lower consumption. When you lower consumption, aggregate demand shifts left. So that's basically growth. And interestingly, this is one of the interesting things, and I think it was mentioned in a piece that People's News did a few days ago. So aggregate demand is essentially composed of consumption. So this is consumer consumption, government spending, investment, and net trade. So that's X minus M, exports minus imports. Now, in the UK, aggregate demand, so our growth, is 2/3 made up of consumer consumption, which is far higher than other countries. So that means that any impact on consumer consumption, whether it be, really good Christmas, so loads of people spend loads of money, or we've just had Brexit, so no one wants to buy a computer anymore, that impacts our growth far more than it would do in other countries, because in other countries they're far more dependent upon other bits. And I think that's what we've seen as a result of kind of these cuts, is people are spending less money. We get all these great, BBC News headlines, this Christmas was record, people bought loads of really expensive presents for each other. Yeah, but that's just a 3-month window. On the whole, over the past 3-4 years, consumer spending has been decreasing. And we've seen that in our falling growth rate, the lowest in the G7 currently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to that, I think because, like you say, we live in a country where the economy is so based on consumer spending. It also kind of ties into the idea that and I'm sure, well, I'm almost certain you all agree that trickle-down economics is by far debunked 100 times by now. But just to kind of pull up on that, the idea that cutting taxes, we had the 50p tax cut, and all these tax cuts to corporations and the top 1%, doing that, we know that poor people spend a much higher percentage of their money than rich people do. Rich people, they're rich, they're really good at investing their money and often keeping their money, whereas, poor people will spend a much higher percentage of their income. So investing in social security programs, and potentially we could touch upon the idea of, I don't know, what do you guys think of universal basic income? Because I think,
good idea,
especially when we have a budget surplus, investing in a system like that could be really beneficial to really speed up growth when we see such a really, for our country, pathetic growth that we do at the moment.
Yeah,
I think I completely agree. Go on, Iwan. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think the Tories got it wrong. And as John said, the only way a tax cut can be an economic stimulus if it's on the bottom half of the nation. Only a tax cut on the poorest people who are earning will cause that. And I think UBI is an idea that's obviously coming into sort of fringe of a progressive movement now. I know I've seen the data from Finland. It seems to be working well there.
Yeah.
But there's no way the Conservative government will pass UBI, because a lot of their vote on benefits goes into an undeserving poor and a deserving poor, and sort of breaking those two up. And while UBI works very well if you're willing to look at the mathematics and the theory behind it, it doesn't work well in a gut reaction, regressive political scenario system.
I think what we've touched on. Sorry, go on, John.
Yeah, it's a shame that the base is like that, because if you look at the actual facts of UBI and, like Ewan said, how it's worked out in where they've tested it in England, you just cut so much on bureaucracy surrounding social security nets, and you're giving cash in hand to these poor people. You often see much changes in the kind of the way of life, their positivity, then sometimes their attitude towards work in general.
You also you're never worse off working under UBI. I think that's a key one. If you want to get people back to work, you've got to keep giving, working tax credits are fine, but I think UBI, to be able to cut all that out and always be better off working, no matter if it's 2 hours or 40, I think that's a good thing. It will stop complex mathematics in working out, am I better off not working than I am working?
Yeah. I think what we've touched on briefly is the concept of the Laffer curve. Now, Ewan and I had a conversation about this a few months ago. I've slowly been converted that I think it's a pretty stupid idea. Essentially, the Laffer curve was drawn on a napkin in a restaurant in New York by a Republican who was trying to justify tax cuts. The theory behind it is if you reduce the tax rates, more people are going to pay tax. If you put corporation tax from 20% to 10%, more corporations are going to flood to the country and pay lots of corporation tax, and everything will be fabulous. Unfortunately, we know it doesn't work in practice.
Well,
it's a
danger.
Fairly good groundings, but it doesn't.
I'll say two things about it. Yeah. Firstly, it's a race to the bottom, isn't it? If people are thinking, we're going to cut our corporation tax rate to whatever percentage, and companies are going to come here, well, other governments are going to respond. It'd be better if people, if you could somehow get other countries to put them up, but obviously that's not going to happen. The other thing is to consider is the Laffer curve is not centered around. Well, it's unknown where it's centered around.
It's very simplified.
Yeah, and generally speaking, cutting corporation tax will never generate more
Yeah,
income.
and I also think like what that kind of does and shows as like the kind of priorities of your nation, like where they've got really like relatively low corporation tax, like Ireland, you know, does the people of Ireland, you know, fare any better than people say in Norway, where corporation tax is huge? It's really high there. Yet the Nordic countries, as we know, are always kind of
The what, John? The Nordic countries.
Scandinavia, sorry.
Nordic, you were going for.
I think, Scandinavian countries are always like top of the kind of happiness scale, and I really put that down to, and development index, and they have really ingrained and strong social security nets within their country. And you then interview, you go deeper into these polls they do, and they'll say, oh, it's because we don't have worries about, you know, if we get injured, if we have health problems, we've got free healthcare, college is free, all their education is free. You know, we don't have to worry about our kids growing up in this country. You know they've got some future here. Whereas the number one reason for bankruptcies in the States, for example, are medical reasons. So you can understand why that would be a huge kind of physical and very real problem that all these people face that's really affecting their lives. So it's like, what do you prioritise there? Corporations and this race to the bottom of who can have the kind of best economic standpoint, or do you actually prioritise your people? And often we see that when you prioritise the people and their livelihood, you actually get good economic results.
I think an interesting thing about the Norwegian tax system, and actually other countries in Scandinavia, I can't remember if Finland do it as well, is how simple it is. The UK's tax system, to me, seems, I mean, it is so complicated.
Nah, it's not. You haven't been to America.
Okay, fine. Well, the States is also stupidly complicated, but it doesn't need to be very complicated, because in Norway, essentially, you pay one tax on your income. You don't pay council tax because that comes under your. So their tax rate is generally higher. So let's say you're earning $20,000 a year. You generally pay more income tax, but that's because you don't pay council tax, stamp duty, air passenger tax, all this other bollocks. You know, it's. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, but there's lots of hidden taxes in this country.
There are lots of taxes in the UK. A lot of little things. You know, it's sort of. You might say you pay sort of 40% tax on your income, but then you pay loads of other little taxes, and it gets higher and higher and higher. Whereas in Norway, it's just one tax.
And the reason for that is, Henry, is income tax is a very progressive tax, and obviously the country's further left wing than our country, and due to the fact that we're right wing, further right wing, we've shoved a load of regressive taxes on the end: sales tax, VAT. Council tax being more aggressive than income tax. All these more regressive taxes have been shoved on, and basically don't help. You need a simple, very progressive tax system on income.
And in real terms, all these kind of VAT and sale taxes, they affect like a lot worse of people. Whereas with income tax, they're much kind of, especially if you do it, you know, percentage of total income. Like you say, it's a much more progressive way of doing things.
Yeah.
I think we should probably move on at some point to Amber Rudd.
I think we've gone off on a tangent on economics there.
We've had an interesting economic discussion, but if we let's bring it back down to domestic politics.
John talking about UBI.
Amber Rudd obviously resigned this week amid the ongoing, I should stress, Windrush scandal. Let's do some basic questions. Number one, Ewan, was it right for her to resign? Yes or no?
Yeah.
John, was it right for her to resign? Yes or no? Resign, rather.
100%. But
yeah, right. So we all agree on that. We need to find something to disagree on then.
What do people think about her relationship? Is what I want to know.
I think. Yeah. So it seems the problems kind of began to arise back in 2016. Obviously, Theresa May was Home Secretary then, not Amber Rudd. there was that cartoon. Was it? I can't remember which paper did it. Basically saying
it was Evening Standard.
it was the Evening Standard.
George
It was a
Osborne.
brilliant cartoon, and it just said Amarod's resign instead of him, or whatever it was. And I think fundamentally we can't have the Prime Minister resign. She's terrible, obviously, but we can't really have the Prime Minister resign. That's going to be terrible for stability. But I do slightly feel it's in a very typical politics. Something goes wrong, you immediately blame the person in charge. Immediately, you never look at who's got things wrong in the past. I think yes, it was right that she resigned, and yes, she did lie and mislead.
Her problem was.
But she was holding the grenade when it blew up.
Her problem was that she decided to cover for the Prime Minister. She should have just said, "Yep, it was May's fault. She did all these nasty things in 2016. Had nothing to do with me." Obviously, she couldn't do that. Yeah, I know she couldn't do that, but that was her problem. She had to defend May, and by defending May, she shot herself in the foot.
Just quickly for me, and like potentially any of our listeners, I know more or less the details of the topic, but I think Henry, you're probably more informed. What exactly happened with the Windrush scandal?
So Windrush, it's so called the Windrush scandal because they came over. Well, the first generation of the Windrush generation, so the first boatload, came over on a ship called the MV something Windrush. Basically, it's called the Windrush because a ship that brought the first load over was called the Windrush.
From the West Indies. And
essentially the scandal has arisen because the UK committed to, whilst we were still in the European Union, so this is back in 2016, the UK committed, from what I can understand, to cracking down on those who aren't British nationals, so do not have British citizenship, and obviously if you do not have a right to live in this country, the UK decides to deport them. Now, what I think the mistake arose is that the UK put a quota on this. So essentially, they wanted a set number. I don't know what it was. I don't think that's been revealed to the public. But they wanted X number of people deported per year. And the Windrush generation from the West Indies were kind of a target. It's important to note that the Home Office failings haven't been isolated to the Windrush generation. A number of other groups of people's lives have been really badly damaged by this. But they were targeted. So obviously this happened back about half a century ago. So it's mostly concerned with the children of the people that came over then. But the British government essentially threatened the children. They threatened them with deportation if they couldn't prove British citizenship. That's my kind of summary.
Yeah, and quickly on that, just to go a little bit to the history on it. It was after World War II when Britain was encouraging immigration from the Commonwealth countries, and it was just under 500 migrants who came, and it was because we wanted an immigration boom because we lacked a big labour force to rebuild the country essentially after World War II. So it kind of semantics and how it all looks, sending back people who helped quote unquote rebuild the country. Doesn't look great for the Tories.
And they've lived here 60 however long. One question, Albert, what do we think about the replacement? So, Sajid Javid.
What is an interesting one?
I think it's a bit of
the pose.
Yeah, he started with the power.
The pose.
The power pose. Oh, good lord.
I want to know who does their PR, but this is the man who called Momentum neo-fascists.
Yeah.
It doesn't really strike a good when a group within the Labour Party, whose actually sole focus in the Labour Party is increasing democracy in the Labour Party, is called a fascist group. He's also.
But again, he doesn't. I don't think he understands the definition of fascism.
I don't think he understands.
It's the complete opposite of fascism.
I don't think he understands.
Nowadays,
I don't think
he'll throw that word around.
Yeah, especially at Momentum, who have the word. Literally, people don't have a clue about them. But I don't think he's the man for the job. But though he is a Tory, so maybe.
I think May was in a difficult situation because I think she fundamentally had to choose someone from her cabinet. The Home Secretary is such an important role that it couldn't be a backbencher. It just couldn't be. And her cabinet is full of nobodies, really. It wasn't going to be Gove because no one likes Gove. I think she probably chose Sajid Javid not because of the controversy that he's caused in the past, including what he said about momentum, but purely because of all of her cabinet ministers. He is one of the most experienced, and I guess she's kind of going on the basis that he's the least likely to cock up.
I'm going to say something quite controversial. And
here we go.
Potentially,
you can't like him.
Future.
That's what you're going to say, isn't it?
No, not that controversial. Potentially token, because isn't he one of the first?
First
Pakistani?
Yeah.
I think he's first Pakistani. So yeah, that's. I think that may have been a factor, but again, I don't have evidence for that.
I'd have gone with Nicky Morgan. No, I would have.
Why?
Competent.
I think John's got a point.
Competent Remainer. That's who I'd have gone with.
I think also given the current climate where all these Tories are accusing Labour of racism, even though they're not racist. I don't know. This is a real the people's news conspiracy theory, but it does tie in quite well. The Tories are supposedly now the party of equality, and we love ethnic minorities, and Labour are evil and bigoted and all that stuff. It kind of plays into the Tories' hands a bit.
Yeah, but it's bollocks, and no one's going to believe that.
No, I know, but it's a conspiracy theory. We love conspiracy theories.
Henry, the scandal has been the Tory party exporting black people who are here legally because they don't like immigrants. I don't think they're going to be the party of openness and diversity.
Well, no, I really kind of side with Henry on this. I really think so many people are playing kind of.
You think he's a token minority for the cabinet?
I wouldn't put it past the government. I mean, you look how kind of politics has played out in America recently. How it's all around kind of labels and not much to do with policy whatsoever. I really think it could have been sat down in a meeting and seriously discussed. Javid is Pakistani descent. This could really kind of show we're dedicated to immigrants. And literally, one of his first statements was, when I first saw this, his parents were immigrants from Pakistan. That could have been my parents, or it could have even been me. The first thing he says is talking about his kind of ethnicity and.
I don't disagree, though. Yeah.
I mean, it won't have been the deciding factor.
No, I don't think so.
Of course, but I think it's a point worth raising. I think looking forward, what's going to happen? Obviously, I think Labour are going to pile on the pressure with Windrush. Now that we've got rid of Rudd, we now have Sajid Javid, and Labour are going to pile on the pressure. We need to resolve this situation quickly. I think. Did anyone see the interview that Diane Abbott did on this morning the other day?
I make it a point never to watch Diane Abbott do an interview because it's just painful.
And it was really frustrating because Diane Abbott is a very intelligent woman, and she is responsible for the Labour Party's.
She's a liability in that cabinet. She's an absolute liability. She can't. I don't know why they have her on TV. They need to have a long, hard look and think. Right, the Labour Party have a far more talented cabinet than the Conservative Party.
I agree. My conspiracy theory on that one though. Jeremy Corbyn and Diane Abbott dated back in the 80s.
Yes, I do know that.
No way.
Do you not know that, John?
They were together.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually a fairly crucial point. Currently Labour are in a very strong position. I thoroughly look forward to the next election. But fundamentally, Diane Abbott is the weakest by far member of the Labour shadow cabinet.
She is,
and she's properly appalling. The other day I got
she says.
I got over 200 retweets on Twitter the other day for making a meme out of her. I'm really proud of that.
That's the reason she's in the cabinet, in the shadow cabinet, is based on loyalty. You can't sack somebody who stood by you while all your party decided that you weren't good enough. You can't just say, suddenly, I'm sorry, Diana. I know for the last 3 years you've stood by me steadfastly and defended every attack I've faced, but sorry, now you can't do an interview, so goodbye. I'm going to put somebody else in. And
I think fair enough keeping her in the cabinet, but just
keep her away from the cameras. Yeah, I think it would be ideal. Yeah, but when you're Home Secretary, I think people are going to know about you. I don't know.
So that's Amber Rudd done, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, go on then.
What other things things were we going to cover?
Local elections.
Oh,
Yeah.
Ewan's favourite.
Oh, I love a good local election. If only more people vote. If only I was in charge of the Labour propaganda machine when the local elections should come out, I would get everyone out voting. It'd be amazing.
They're doing a good job on the old social media as well.
Nah.
Better job than they were.
Not local elections are so key. They actually are. I mean, in my opinion, anyway, due to like the way my brand of socialism, I think that it's very important to have a Labour council for me. And you only have to look. Obviously, I live in a university in Nottingham, and our council here, which is Labour run, is absolutely fantastic. We have a publicly run energy company, which is not for profit, which means my energy bills are about 3 pence. We have an unbelievable public transport system, which is trams, buses, whatever. And the difference they make, this council, is just huge. And then there's an article actually on the People's News about Preston, and it's about how a council encouraged workers' cooperatives to set up and brought something like
Oh, there we go.
100
There we go.
100 it's 150 million back into the economy using economic policy of encouraging cooperatives on a local scale. I think they're key. Having a Labour council is really key, and I'm glad that they look like they'll clean up in London and hopefully around. A note of caution on that: the time we're electing from is 2014, where Ed Miliband was leading in the polls by 2 points. And of course, Jeremy Corbyn is behind in the polls by about 1 point. So theoretically, Corbyn could be losing seats, but I don't think that will happen.
I think it's unlikely.
No, same. Especially not in London, where they've got something like a 20-point lead.
I never really kind of understood and fully grasped how important council elections were, because council still holds like a massive amount of power. I mean, and I am gonna do the old plug for our local council, Warwick.
They're not being elected, mate, so I wouldn't bother.
Oh wait, no. Oh, rubbish, aren't I? But no, it's the Tory. It's the Tory. Oh, who's doing all the rubbish in Leamington?
What the Tory council in Warwick.
Yeah, no, it's the Tory council. Yeah.
It is, but they're not up for election, so no one cares.
I think part of the important thing about council elections actually is not just the amount of power they have, but psychological. Labour's on the up at the moment. They are constantly undermining the Tories. They're constantly revealing the Tories for the mistakes they're making. And a strong result. Well, the elections are tomorrow, aren't they? Are they tomorrow? Or was that the day after?
No, Thursday.
Well, fine, Thursday.
Which might be tomorrow, depending on when this comes out.
Yeah, so a strong result in the council elections is psychologically going to put a huge amount of pressure on May.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not the same as a general election, obviously.
It might help her.
Yeah, it could well help her.
Because if Labour poll at, let's say, 45%, obviously it's not the same as a general election, but if they poll a hugely strong number, the fact that if May goes and they call an election that Labour could win it will scare the pants off the majority of Tory MPs. So it could help her. She might be praying for an absolute drumming on Thursday.
But how would that help her? I don't get it.
Because so imagine so if Labour poll well, that means if there was an election, one would assume they would poll well as well.
Yeah.
So if they depose May, they'll have to call an election.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and because the only way they'll do it is by a vote of no confidence. And should that, and they won't want to do that if Jeremy Corbyn will get in that election. So if they
surely, so then either way, she's not going to get deposed either way.
Well, she might. Well, depends. If she does sort of moderately badly.
So there's like a little window. There's the Goldilocks zone.
Yeah.
We're doing astrology.
But to be honest, they're not going to affect her at all. She'll be in there until after Brexit.
Yeah,
she's
a kind of human shield.
Yeah.
Do we think that's important? Do we think that from now until whenever it is 2019, is it January the 31st, 2019? When's Brexit happening? Whatever the deadline is.
Oh,
do we think it is?
Yeah.
Do we think it's actually actually Labour work with the government over the next how many months it is until the end of Brexit to ensure we have a stable government?
No.
Because, but here's the crucial thing, because we haven't finished negotiating Brexit yet. Fundamentally, the negotiations over the next year or so is going to affect the rest of our lives. We need to present a united front. I think something that actually doesn't help is occasionally Mr. Corbyn meets with the EU negotiators.
No, that's a good thing.
But is it a good thing?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm playing devil's advocate here.
If the Conservative Party wanted to have the Labour Party involved in the Brexit process, they should have a cross-party negotiating team.
But that's my point. I personally feel the whole negotiation should be cross-party. I don't think we should just have David Davis. I think we should have a Labour representative.
Oh, definitely, because it would probably put the IQ up by about 1,000,000%. But apart from that, yeah, they should be.
We're not attacking David Davis.
Yeah, of course we are. This is the most
really
incompetent man in the world in a Brexit. This is a man who's railed against the EU his entire political career, and then as soon as the Brexit vote comes out, he says, "Oh, we can have a trade deal with Germany on cars." No, we can't. You can't have a trade deal with an individual country within the EU. It's a man who spent his entire life railing against Brussels and still knows absolutely nothing about it. He's hopeless. Labour's Keir Starmer, who is an absolutely brilliant politician, should be there. But I don't think Starmer and Corbyn meeting with the EU to discuss if they got in before Brexit has ended, what they'd do is a bad thing. The EU have no influence over our elections.
There's a significant movement in the Labour Party that still wants a second referendum and doesn't even want to. Still still holding on to the idea that we could not be.
There's a significant amount of people in both parties who are waiting for the tide to turn, I think, and should opinions on Brexit turn dramatically, we'd see the Remain camps in both major parties come out in full and go back on that.
Mm-hmm.
You get
do we agree on a second referendum?
I feel that we had a vote. Essentially, more people voted to leave than remain. The referendum was appalling. There was so much disinformation, there was so much propaganda. No one knew they were voting for, and no one knew what actually voting to leave the European Union was. Are they voting to leave the single market? They voting to leave all of it, etc. Soft, hard, etc. But I think fundamentally, we've had a vote now. The British public have spoken. Whether or not everyone's changed their minds now, I personally think is irrelevant. I think the actual
surely
I completely agree. I've always felt that referendums, if used excessively, undermine their use.
They undermine democracy as it was. It's a stupid idea to have any referendum, in my opinion. But to be honest, I don't think it's almost like we're running from a mob now. There's a certain people in this country who will not take no for an answer on Brexit. And I don't think a second referendum. I'm not very unsure about Brexit, really. I don't know, but I have no idea. But I don't support a second referendum. If polling showed that support for remaining in the EU was sort of 60, 65, 70%, I think it would be something to consider. But that isn't the case, and I think we've got to go through with it. I think
it's cool.
I think the one thing the Tory government need to understand is that they've had this referendum result for 2 years now. They still haven't got a viable plan. I thought they've managed to copy what the Labour Party have said most of the time, and weirdly, my respect for the House of Lords has gone through the roof because they seem to be the only people who've understood that they need to sort certain things out. Everything's come from the Lords or Keir Starmer. That's pretty much it.
I think, to be honest, the issue that they're having at the moment is they're not. I think they're not presenting this hugely positive front. If Theresa May accepts that they voted for Brexit, they're going to have Brexit. We're going to have to do Brexit. Then the decision must be we have to make the most of Brexit. We have to try and make it as wonderful as possible. Yeah. And of course, the facts were there were some positives to leaving the EU. Yes,
definitely.
I still think we should probably remain in the EU, but there are definitely some positives of being outside the EU. So what needs to happen now is there needs to be a united front in the Tory party of these are the good things that are going to happen when we leave. And they've got to convince the British public that this is going to be wonderful. Psychologically, that will increase consumer confidence.
There are
good things
advantages.
of leaving the EU.
But they need to be.
Definitely advantages.
They've got to get out of cloud cuckoo land on their negotiation stances, though. That's the problem. They don't have any idea of what realistically needs to happen. They don't have any solutions to islands. They don't have any solutions to immigration. The island border problem is dragged on.
It's so big, like it needs to get sorted out because
the Labour Party have had a solution for months, but they won't go for that.
And I think that's what's really important to have a kind of vote. Like I'd argue that it is important to have a vocal left to kind of pull the Tories away from some of the members of the party are absolutely ludicrous and still think we're in the Commonwealth ages, where we're like this really powerful nation when, Europe has a lot of disincentives to give us the best deal. So if we're at the table kind of making really silly propositions, then they're going to have an even less of a reason to give us anything decent.
Our entire negotiation is basically Europe said one thing. We've come up with a ludicrous statement in response. And after negotiations have played out, Europe's got exactly what it wanted. It happened with the divorce bill, happened with I don't know about the transitional deal, and this is what people warned. I mean, I forget who the Greek finance minister was, who said at the referendum, you do not negotiate with the EU. You go to the table, you get told this is the deal, and it doesn't matter what you say, this is the largest tariff-free economic area in the world. Brussels has, but the government needs to have more realistic negotiating aims to be able to actually get something out of this thing.
I think part of the issue they're having at the moment is they're talking too much to Brussels and less to other countries. I think, part of the sort of fairly rational argument for Brexit is that Europe is the slowest growing continent in the world. The fastest growing part of the world right now is the Far East. And whilst the EU is lovely and wonderful, it also restricts our ability to trade with the Far East. I think fundamentally there's been too much talk of, obviously the Ireland border is hugely important, the transitional border deal is hugely important, and the EU is hugely important. There's been too much talk of actually Brexit negotiations and not enough talk of trade deals with China, South Korea. South Korea is growing at a staggering rate. And if Theresa May could just make a speech saying after Brexit we can, trade with South Korea as much as we like and it's all going to be wonderful. But even if it's not true,
it isn't true.
I know it's not true. Consumer confidence is so important at the moment.
So your advice is lie.
Not lie, bend the truth. Arguably, I'd agree with that. That would potentially strengthen our hand at the table if we're we've got all these potentials abroad, and some of the BRIC economies that are still growing.
Yeah.
Look to Latin America, Brazil, and like you mentioned, China, South Korea, and even parts of Africa. There is places that have real potential to help our economy.
Yeah.
So if we're just like, oh, please give us this, we've got no alternative, then obviously we've kind of got a much weaker hand at the table than if we were to go with many other options.
Yeah, I think they can get a fine deal. If they just sort themselves out, they get a fine deal. Economic powers in the European Union will rule over, I think.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to accept that the first, 2 years or so after Brexit is going to be pretty sort of rocky. But I think long term, it's personally, a lot of our generation were terrified about it. Saying all these old people that over 65s voted for Brexit, they just ruined my life. Not only is that ageist, but I'm fairly sure, and that really upset me because both my grandparents voted for Brexit. And whilst I disagree with them, I didn't like loads of people saying all these old people voted for Brexit, they're evil. I think fundamentally, the next 3-4 years aren't going to be great, and that's not great for us, the younger generation. But give it 10 years, I think we're going to be pretty much okay. I think people are making too much of a fuss of it than it's actually worth.
Yeah, maybe.
But disagree with me.
As long as we don't lose our banking sector, I think we'll be fine.
Because that is our biggest export. It's not cars, it's not jet engines, it's financial services.
Yeah. So as long as they don't all go to Frankfurt, we'll be fine. So
we could lower corporation tax.
No, Henry, the actual way is actually co-determination, but I'll talk about that later.
Is this cooperatives again?
Well, no, it's sort of halfway house.
Oh, God.
If you have workers' representatives on board of directors, it can help stop outsourcing in times of economic problems. Yeah. Socialism,
Were there any other
mate.
things we wanted to cover on this wonderful podcast?
This came from local elections.
This did come from local elections. We've done almost all of politics.
Yeah.
Have we really?
A wide spectrum.
Any foreign issues you want to cover?
No, I don't think so. So with that, thank you very much all for listening, and you'll hear us again, I'm sure, fairly soon. I'm not going to put a date on it, but yeah, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.